I've been asked in the past why I never post anything that supports or opposes any political or social causes on my social media or any of my business channels. And you know what? The answer is really quite simple, but I thought it was worth talking about, especially from the lens of a solopreneur. But before we dive into this, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you never miss a tutorial or upload. So I thought this would be a good topic for the first episode of season 3 because honestly, it's something that I'm pretty passionate about, which you might not realize considering that you don't see any of this normally on my channel or anywhere else. But especially over the last 5-ish years or so, where there's just been so much going on online, so much toxic energy, so much just fighting and just so much. And to me, it's like, I don't think social media is the place for any of that, honestly, but especially if you're a business owner, I really don't think that that is the place for you to share your beliefs and opinions. And let me just, before you start coming for me, let me just explain what I'm talking about and where there are some, I don't know, maybe some areas where this may not be true. But here's the thing. Most of the people in my circle, most of the people watching my channel, most of the people that I consider colleagues, our businesses, our platforms are not based on political topics or religion or social topics of any kind, social causes. We're business owners, and typically we're talking about business stuff. For me, obviously, as you know, yes, I have the podcast, I have my Faith and Focus podcast, but primarily my channel and my content is surrounding being a small business owner, being a solopreneur, and running your business in an efficient way. And to me, that's what you're here for. I assume that when you're coming to my channel, when you're subscribing to my channel, that's the information that you want. That's the opinions that you want from me, is what I think of different tools and things like that. And I don't assume that you care to know my every thought on every possible thing in the world. And even if you are curious, which I could understand, that doesn't mean that it's my right or my place to use my platform in that way. So let me just give kind of an example of a time when I personally experienced a business doing this to me in just such an overly aggressive and kind of extreme way. So in 2020, when we were dealing with the height of COVID, in fact, I think this was still, it might have been after officially lockdown. I can't remember. But it was during that time, it was, of course, around the election here in the US. And a lot of people had lots of opinions and lots of feelings and a lot of that. And I get it. Okay, I did too. This is not about judgment of any kind in that regard. But in my corporate world, I was exposed to a particular company that, in my opinion, you know what? It's not even fair to say this about the company because that's kind of my point here. An owner of a company. The company is called Expensify. And if you've been in the corporate world at all, you probably at least know what it is if you haven't used it yourself. And Expensify is basically a platform that allows employees to submit expenses that they are entitled to being reimbursed for, whether that's for travel or other things like that. And then that goes through an approval process and they get approved or denied. Expensify is, I don't know if it's like one of the top platforms, but it is the one that I have used at most of my corporate jobs recently. I don't use it much because I don't do a whole lot of traveling or spending money on behalf of my corporate companies. But because it is a part of our tech stack, that means we're automatically signed up for marketing emails and things like that. And I remember it was just before the election, the CEO, I guess he was the owner. I don't know if he started it or not, but he was definitely the CEO of Expensify. His name is David Barrett. And he had strong opinions about the election, as many did. And he seemed to think it was appropriate to use his vast professional marketing email list to not only share his opinions and beliefs, but actually insult the people who did not agree with him. The morning that I received the email he sent out, I was so incredibly offended. And it's not even about like believing what he believes or agreeing with him or any of that. It was just the fact that he would use this platform in such a way, in such a personal way, because not only is that incredibly offensive to people who disagree with him. I mean, he literally called them morons. Okay, he was not pulling punches at all. Not only did he offend and insult the people who didn't agree with him, but it's kind of offensive even to people who do agree with him, because he really showed his true colors. Like, what if on the next topic you don't agree with him? Then it's going to be aimed at you, right? It's like, if you don't agree exactly with what he's saying, then he's just going to blast you. I honestly even ended up having a conversation with the COO of our company because I mentioned it to my boss when I got the email. I was just like, I can't even believe that we received this kind of email, that this would be sent out by one of our professional corporate partners and things like that. And he mentioned something to his boss, which was a COO, who ended up calling me and apologizing because, it was so unprofessional. It was so inappropriate. Unfortunately, we kept working with Expensify. It was obviously not enough for them to stop working with them. But in my opinion, like if I had received an email like that from a partner in my solopreneur business, you better believe I would have been looking for an alternative very quickly. It's not about people believing the same things that I do and agreeing with everything that I agree with. I don't care about that necessarily. But for someone to show that level of unprofessionalism, it speaks volumes about everything else about their business. It tells me that they don't run their business with integrity. And, I thought about it too from the perspective of the employees at Expensify, because as a CEO of the company, him sending out this blast was basically talking on behalf of the company, which by extension is kind of talking on behalf of all of its employees, which is so incredibly unfair, especially because the reality is that the insults that he was slinging was probably actually directed at some of the people who worked under him, because I can't imagine that all of the people at the company have the exact same beliefs as their CEO. So to me, it was just like, I couldn't even believe the level of unprofessionalism and inappropriateness that came out of this man, and the gall that he would represent his entire company just because of his own personal, it just, the whole thing just left such a bad taste in my mouth. I can't even tell you. And I know as a solopreneur, you might feel like, well, okay, but like, I get that like a CEO of a big corporate entity should not represent his entire company that way. But as a solopreneur, like we've talked about this, your core identity is often tied into your business in a lot of ways. And plus, it's just you, right? So when you put something like that out there, I mean, you're just speaking on your own behalf. And that's true. You do have the right to do that. However, in my opinion, I think the same rules should apply. I mean, not only are you risking insulting and offending people that you don't even realize you might be offending just because you're expressing your opinion, especially if you do it in such an offensive and insulting way as he did on such a platform, but at the same time, like, be a little more forward thinking. You're growing a company, right? In theory, at some point, someday, you may have employees. You may have lots of employees. And if there's one thing we all know, it's that once something is out there on the internet, it never actually goes away. So it may be just you right now and you're just, representing yourself, but imagine yourself 5, maybe even 10 years down the line, you've got a bigger company, you've got employees, and somehow this comes back around. Maybe it's a tweet or, an Instagram post, whatever. We've seen it happen a million times where people go digging through somebody's internet history and they find something offensive, or they find just anything. It's going to stick around. It could come back to haunt you. And I just would hope that you would respect your potential future employees as much as I think you should be respecting your current and potential customers right now. Now, let me just be clear about one thing, though. This is not about avoiding your beliefs, okay? It's not about that at all. It's about preserving the trust that people bring you in the first place. It's about being respectful of the reason that you have a platform or an email list or whatever it is in the first place. Unless you have a business or you're a content creator that specifically focuses on political or social causes or religion or things like that, you don't have the right to suddenly turn it into a soapbox. I always like to do research when I'm talking about certain topics like this. And I found an interesting, there was a quote, but like the quote itself wasn't really important. It was more the concept from the head of Coinbase, which, to be honest, I know nothing about Coinbase. I know that it's like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but I don't even begin to understand any of that. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. But Brian Armstrong, who is the head of Coinbase, he called the company mission focused. And he specifically said that he consciously avoided political and social debates to stay true to purpose. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here, right? There's a reason that you started your channel. There's a specific topic, a specific audience that you have drawn to you. So whether this is through a YouTube channel or TikTok or, just an email list that you've grown, you have attracted these people to you for a specific reason. And unless it is political, social, religious, then you need to stay true to purpose. Doesn't mean you can't ever pivot and change what you're talking about, but to just throw something in there completely out of left field just because you're feeling it in the moment is not appropriate. It's about respecting the reason that people are subscribed to you in the first place or following you or tuned in, right? And honestly, if we're truly listening to what our audience is telling us, which we talk about a lot with market research and things like that, then we would listen and hear that they are likely telling us this. In my research, I ran across a Reddit thread where people were talking about exactly this, like how they felt about podcasters or gamers or whatever, just kind of suddenly shoving this kind of stuff into their content when that wasn't what it was about in the first place. And there were a couple of comments that I saw in that thread that I just wanted to highlight because I felt like they're telling us very, very clearly how they feel about this, and we need to listen. First one said, "It's somehow a breaking of an unspoken contract to subject the listener to an unwanted, inappropriate sermon." And I could not agree more. That's exactly what it is. And any time that has happened to me with a YouTube channel or an email list or anything like that, you want to know the first thing that I do? I unsubscribe. Honestly, sometimes even if I agree with what they're saying, I unsubscribe because it still speaks volumes about their approach to things and how they're going to be in the future. Another commenter said, "If I'm not listening to a podcast about politics, I don't need to hear your opinion." Yeah, exactly. Just because you have a platform for some reason doesn't mean that we need to hear everything that you have to say about other topics, right? You need to stay on point. And then the last comment that I wanted to highlight was actually from someone who I think is a podcaster. And he says, "Absolutely, the gaming podcast that I'm on has 2 rules. No politics, no religion. It puts people off." And that's exactly right. If that's not what they're here for, it puts people off, regardless of whether they agree with your politics or your religion or not. There is a time and place for your views and your opinions, but your small business isn't it. When I look around at the thought leaders of today, the business mentors, the personal development gurus, all of that, the ones that I respect the most are the ones where I have literally no idea what they believe. Okay? It's the ones who never talk about it. Now, do I think that they have no opinion or they're not passionate about certain things? Absolutely not. I'm certain that they are, actually. But they support those things in their personal life. They support those things in private. They're wise enough to recognize and respect that just because they have a platform for a specific reason does not give them the right to turn it into a soapbox for every personal belief, especially when that's not why their audience is there. So I just wanted to close with this clip that has been going around the internet recently. It's an interview with Mike Wallace and Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson, if you don't know, used to be the host of The Tonight Show. He was one of the original hosts of The Tonight Show, might have been the original host of The Tonight Show. Anyways, he was a comedian, an entertainer, and Mike Wallace was asking him, because honestly, this concept of celebrities and influencers talking about their politics and their social beliefs in the wrong platform is not new. This is not new. He was being asked about that in this interview, and I really, really liked the way he responded because I just feel like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. So let's give this a watch together.
You get sensitive about the fact that people say, he'll never take a serious controversy.
Well, I have an answer to that. I said, now, tell me the last time that Jack Benny, Red Skelton, any comedian, used his show to do serious issues. That's not what I'm there for. Can't they see that?
But you're not...
Why do they think that just because you have a Tonight Show that you must deal in serious issues? It's a danger. It's a real danger. Once you start that, you start to get that self-important feeling that what you say has great import. And you know, strangely enough, you could use that show as a forum. You could sway people, and I don't think you should as an entertainer.
That's right. That's exactly how I feel. Whether it's being an entertainer, a content creator, or a business owner, just because you respect my opinions on things like Trello and email marketing and other platform-related things does not mean that my opinion in other areas like political, religious, or social causes becomes more important and I deserve to use my platform in that way. That's not something that I will ever do here on the channel because I respect you guys way too much. I respect the reason that you're here and why you watch my content. And so I will never use it in this kind of way. So if you've ever wondered what I believe about something that's not related to technology and your business, and you wonder why I don't ever talk about things or post about social or political causes, well, this is the really simple reason why. I just respect you too much to shove my opinion in your face. I hope that you liked that video and more importantly, that you found it helpful. And if you did, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with a fellow solopreneur. And make sure that you check out the description for links for how we can connect and maybe even work together.